My name is Daniel. I'm 39 now, but everything I'm about to tell you started when I was 31. Back then, I thought I had things figured out, not perfectly, but enough to walk with my head high. I had a good job, a small apartment I could afford, and a rough but decent relationship with my family. My father had passed away a few years earlier, and it brought me closer to my mother and, more importantly, to my older brother, James. James had always been the golden child, the one with charm, confidence, and just enough recklessness to be admired by everyone, even when he messed up. I was more reserved, careful, I didn't take risks, I didn't need the spotlight. But I always felt like I had to prove myself, especially around him. He ran a few small businesses over the years. Most of them failed. But James always had a way of spinning things, like every failure was just a stepping stone to something bigger. I wanted to believe him. He was my brother. And after our dad died, I felt like it was my responsibility to keep the family together. One night, James called me. I remember exactly where I was sitting at my kitchen table with leftover pasta, half watching a game on mute. He sounded excited. Said he had something big in the works, a logistics startup. We've got the tech, the contacts, the market's wide open, he said, but he needed capital. And more than that, he needed someone he could trust to manage operations, because, and I quote, "You've always been the steady one." I didn't say yes right away. I told him I needed to think. But deep down, I think I had already decided. For the first time, he wasn't just asking for money, he was offering partnership, a seat at the table. I pulled out my savings, $60,000. That was everything I had managed to set aside after 8 years of work. James matched it, or at least that's what he said. We filed the paperwork, registered the company under both our names, and got to work. For the first few months, things were looking good. We got a few clients, outsourced a few deliveries, and started building up a reputation. I was doing most of the background work, scheduling, permits, taxes. James was the face of the company, handshakes and pitches. I didn't question it, that was the dynamic. I stayed behind the curtain. He took the applause. Then came the first red flag. I got a notice about a loan application in our company's name, except I hadn't applied for a loan. I checked the paperwork James had signed for it, forged my signature. When I confronted him, he laughed it off, said it was a temporary cash boost, and we'd be in the green in no time. I didn't laugh. I told him never to do that again. 2 weeks later, I found out he took a second loan, larger, and this time, he'd used our mother's house, the one we both grew up in, as collateral. I was furious, not just at him, but at myself, for not seeing it coming, for letting it get this far. I tried to take back control. I changed passwords, froze accounts, contacted the bank, but it was too late. James had been operating under my nose the whole time, pulling money out of the company, moving it around, covering tracks. I told my mom everything. She didn't believe me at first. She said, James wouldn't do that. But when the bank sent her the foreclosure warning, reality hit her hard. I wanted to call the police, press charges, but I didn't, because no matter how much damage he caused, he was still my brother. And more than that, if he went down, we'd all go down with him. Mom would lose the house, I'd lose my career. So I made a decision. I sold my car, took out a personal loan, emptied the last of my retirement account. I paid off the most urgent debt, just enough to keep the house safe and the company afloat. I didn't do it for James, I did it for Mom. For the years she spent raising us alone after Dad died, for the roof over our heads, for the guilt I couldn't shake. James disappeared for a while after that, vanished, stopped returning calls. Eventually, I heard from a friend that he'd moved across the country and started working under a different name. I stayed behind and dealt with everything, the taxes, the clients, the mess. The company never recovered. I shut it down a year later, declared personal bankruptcy. Started working 2 jobs to keep up with what was left of my debt. Mom passed away not long after. Cancer, fast and cruel. At her funeral, James showed up wearing a new suit, smiling like nothing had happened. He hugged me, whispered, "Thanks for holding it together." That was the last time I saw him. People talk about forgiveness like it's a moment, a decision, but it's not. It's a weight you carry until you learn how to set it down. And sometimes you never do. I don't tell this story out of anger. I've already spent too many years with that. I tell it because if you're listening, and if you ever find yourself choosing between your blood and your own survival, I hope you choose yourself. I didn't, and I lost everything. But I built something new, piece by piece, quietly, away from spotlights and signatures, away from promises. Some scars don't fade, but they don't bleed forever either. Story number 2. I have never been one to take big risks. My whole life, I have followed simple rules. Work honestly, don't get involved in dirty schemes, and stay away from people with too many stories and too few deeds. But it was one such person who changed my whole life one day forever. His name was Nathan. We met at a refresher course. At that time, I was working as a financial analyst in a medium-sized company. Everything was stable, but a little boring. Nathan was the complete opposite of me. Charismatic, talkative, always with money, although no one really knew where from. He often said that hired labor is modern slavery, and every time we had lunch together, he would throw out ideas on how to get out of the circle. I wasn't particularly interested until one day he made a specific offer. He was looking for a partner to launch a financial agency, a legally registered service for managing private clients' funds. Not a bank, not an investment fund, but something in between. He said that he already had a list of clients, all with money, but with no desire to show up in large banks. He offered me to handle the calculations, to be the face of order. All transactions are official, through accounts, taxes, everything as it should be. I doubted, for a week, too, but then the company began laying off, and I was under threat of dismissal, and then I gave in. I decided to take a risk, like, maybe this is the very chance. We registered the company, opened an office in a small building, and the first clients really came. At first, everything went smoothly. I saw the movement of money, saw the reports, kept records, and, surprisingly, even began to receive good interest. Nathan, as promised, was engaged in external relations. He showed up with new clients, confidently conducted negotiations, and everything looked like a legal, albeit a little shadowy business. But after 6 months, minor oddities began. I began to notice that the amounts in the reports did not always match. One of the clients, whom I remembered as closed, suddenly started asking about the balances, claiming that he had invested more than we had on record. I tried to figure it out. Nathan explained everything by communication errors, problems with the bank, difficulties in reporting. But when the third client started complaining, I dug deeper, and I discovered something creepy. Nathan kept 2 parallel databases, the official one, the one I saw, and the second, hidden one, where real amounts were recorded. Clients transferred money to the company, but he took some of these funds offshore through dummy accounts registered to people whose names I saw for the first time. I was shocked, and the worst thing is that my signature was on most of the documents. Officially, I was not just aware of it, I confirmed it all. When I ran into him, he was absolutely calm. He said, "You knew what you were getting into. You don't think that people just bring money and don't want anything in return? It's all a game, and you're in it." I wanted to quit, file a police report, tell the clients everything, but he warned me. Calmly, without threats. He simply reminded me that if I said a word, not only he would collapse, but I would too, because all the documentation was on me. 3 days later, the office burned down. The fire, according to experts, started because of a short circuit. All the servers, all the papers, everything burned. But before that, Nathan disappeared. I was left alone. With debts, with a criminal record, and without a job. Clients called, demanding explanations. Some threatened. I tried to explain that I myself had become a victim, but who needs that? A couple of months later, I was charged with fraud. The investigation lasted more than a year. I spent everything to prove my innocence, and yet I got a suspended sentence. Friends disappeared. Some thought I was in the know. My parents stopped communicating with me. I moved, changed my name on the internet, closed all my old accounts. Now I live quietly. I work remotely, under a contract, without unnecessary connections. And I still think about how easily one person can ruin not only your life, but also your name. Not a bullet, not an illness, not a mistake, but simply someone else's impudence and your naivety.